Hey guys, tonight we begin with something simple, but not easy: stillness. Not the kind that waits for the world to be quiet, but the kind that hums quietly beneath the noise. The kind you carry with you even as life hurries past. You've probably felt it lately, that subtle urgency, like you're running behind even when you're exactly where you should be. The world moves fast. Deadlines, news cycles, unfinished conversations, and the ever-ticking clock in your mind whisper that you should be doing more, achieving more, knowing more. But right now, you don't have to chase anything, just breathe. Let that breath soften your face. Notice how your body sinks into wherever you are, the fabric beneath you, the air on your skin. This moment, this still point, is yours. Here's a quiet reminder: you will never be able to control the world, but you can learn to control how you meet it. That's a truth the Stoics knew well, and tonight we'll lean into that knowing. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in a dim corridor of memory, one where you're always rushing. You're younger, maybe just last year, maybe much farther back. You're late, or you think you are, everything blurs. The day moves forward without asking if you're ready. There's noise, motion, demand, and within it all, you barely notice your breath. You barely notice you. And yet within that moment there was something else, something you missed, a space, a flicker of calm. It's easy to forget that the Stoics lived in chaos too. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire at war. And still, night after night, he wrote in his journal by lamplight, searching for clarity. He wrote not because the world gave him peace, but because he refused to let the world take his peace from him. That's what you're learning now. How to return to the quiet place inside you, even when the outside world doesn't slow down, especially then. It starts with noticing. Right now, for instance, where is your jaw? Is it tight? Where are your shoulders? Are they trying to hold up something invisible? Let them drop. Let gravity do the work. Let yourself be instead of do. You don't need to earn this moment. You're already in it. And it's okay to arrive gently. Philosophers have long argued whether true peace is found in withdrawal from the world or in participation with detachment. The Stoics leaned toward the latter. Don't escape life. Engage it with discipline and grace. They didn't seek caves or silence as an escape, but instead forged inner silence in the noise. And you're doing that now. You're staying in the discomfort of slowing down, staying in the honesty of presence. There's a kind of resistance that arises, though, when you stop hurrying. A strange guilt, a voice that says you should be doing something. But ask yourself, what exactly? What is so urgent that it cannot wait for you to be calm? There's a parable told quietly through time of the man who sat beside a river and watched leaves float by. One leaf caught the light just right, gold and trembling, and in that moment the man felt something truer than any sermon or speech. He didn't rush, he didn't capture it, he simply was with it. Maybe stillness is just that, choosing not to chase every leaf. You are not falling behind, you're arriving, and you're doing it on your own terms. Of course, your mind will try to speed back up. It always does. But like a wise parent watching a child's tantrum, you can simply notice, breathe, and stay. This is your first step. Noticing the speed of things and choosing in full awareness to slow down, even if it's uncomfortable, even if no one else understands why you're doing it. Remember the callback we mentioned, that flicker of calm in the past you missed. You're choosing not to miss it now. You're learning to walk slower, not because you have to, but because you finally understand that rushing doesn't get you anywhere more meaningful. Not really. And when people ask what you're doing with your life, you may one day smile softly and say, I'm learning how to stay still in a world that forgot how. Maybe they'll understand. Maybe they won't, but you'll know the rain doesn't ask your permission. It comes when it comes. And tonight it's falling in your mind, a slow, quiet kind of storm, not violent, just persistent. You feel it in your chest, that low ache of urgency, of uncertainty. It gathers around small things. A message left unread, a decision still looming, a worry you've half forgotten but not quite released. This is the weather of emotion. You don't have to stop the storm. The Stoics never said that. They said, be with it and remain unmoved. They didn't teach emotional suppression, but clarity. They didn't deny feeling, they just didn't build temples to every passing one. Imagine you're looking out a window now. You can see the sky turning. The wind picks up, leaves dance in the street, people rush to close their umbrellas. You feel the instinct to brace against it too. But then something shifts. You remember, this storm, like all others, will pass. You don't have to rush to fix it. You don't have to solve every discomfort like a math problem. You can let emotion rise and let it fall, just like weather. That's what Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself on nights he couldn't sleep. Don't let the force of impression carry you away. Say to it, wait, let me see what you are and what you represent. And so you do the same. Right now, a memory surfaces. Someone once hurt you, not in a way that made headlines, but in the quiet way that sticks around. A sharp word, a moment of dismissal. You wanted to respond, to say something cutting or clever to prove a point. But you didn't. You held still, not out of weakness but out of wisdom. You're remembering that now, and something inside you relaxes, because you realize you survived without the last word, and that's more powerful than you thought at the time. Stillness doesn't mean nothing happens inside you. It just means you're not ruled by what happens inside you. There's a strange freedom in that, isn't there? To feel without obeying, to observe without reacting, to let the rain fall and not have to run for cover. Some philosophers argue that equanimity, calmness in all conditions, is impossible, that even the wisest mind has its limits and the heart, by nature, must be moved. But perhaps it's not about being unshaken, it's about choosing which waves deserve your attention. You're doing that now. Each breath is a small decision not to follow the storm deeper. Each pause is a reminder that you are not at the mercy of your moods. You are the witness, not the weather. So breathe. Return to your body again just as it is. Maybe you're lying on your side or sitting upright or curled in the quiet space between thoughts. Feel the shape of yourself, the edges of your skin, the coolness of air around your neck. This is your anchor. When the wind howls, and it will, come back to this. Come back to the truth that feelings are visitors. You don't need to make them tea or ask them to stay. In ancient times, the Stoics would train themselves by imagining the worst, yes, but also by rehearsing their calm. They'd sit quietly and picture insults, losses, cold mornings and bare tables, and in those images they would practice not panicking. What you're doing now isn't so different. You're rehearsing your calm, not pretending the storm isn't there, but watching it with open eyes, steady hands, and a soul that knows. This too shall pass. Remember yesterday, or maybe the year before, when your whole world seemed like it might fall apart, and now look, you're still here, breathing, healing, growing slower than you'd like perhaps, but growing all the same. The storm passed, as it always does. And when the next one comes, you'll know the rain doesn't last, the sky doesn't fall, and you don't have to hurry to fix what time will soften. So let the wind knock on your window, let it rattle the panes. But inside, stay warm, stay with yourself, stay still. There's a particular kind of weight that presses down on you when you feel behind in life, not from anyone shouting at you, but from that quiet, constant voice whispering, you're late. Everyone else is ahead. Tonight that voice may be faint or it may be loud, but either way, let's listen differently this time. The world is obsessed with pace, milestones, metrics. Everyone wants to know what you've achieved, what you're working on, where you're going next. It's as if your worth can be charted on a timeline, as if life is a race and you're already losing because you pause to breathe. But what if you're not late? What if you are not a deadline? Let that idea settle for a moment. Think about Marcus Aurelius again, writing by candlelight between wars. His empire was falling apart in places, famine, betrayal, illness, and yet, what did he do? He reminded himself, if you're doing what's right, don't worry if it takes longer than you hoped. So tonight you try it too. You stop chasing the clock, you step off the imaginary treadmill, you tell yourself, I am exactly where I need to be to learn what I need to learn. That may not sound dramatic, but it is revolutionary, because behind that hurried feeling there's often grief, the grief of who you thought you'd be by now, the life you imagined you'd be living. Maybe it was more successful, maybe it was simpler, maybe you were braver or richer or happier, or just different, but the truth is you're here now, and here is sacred because it's real. It's not that you stop growing. Stoicism isn't about surrendering to fate like a wilted flower. No, it's about choosing how you grow, with patience, with clarity, with the awareness that the universe doesn't owe you a schedule. Some ancient thinkers believed fate was a river and your choices were the oar. You can fight the current or you can steer wisely, but you can't rush the river. You can't demand that it flow faster to suit your dreams. You're not late, you're becoming. Of course, people around you will seem ahead. That friend who got the job, that cousin with the perfect relationship, that stranger online who seems to be 20 and already wildly successful. You scroll, you compare, you feel the old ache again. But remember this, the Stoics taught that comparison is a thief dressed as a teacher. It promises lessons but only delivers suffering. No one is living your life. No one has your path. So what would it mean to be late for something that was never theirs to begin with? There's a quiet irony here, one of those soft truths you might smile at if you weren't so tired. The more you rush, the more you miss. And the more you miss, the more you feel behind. So tonight you try something radical. You walk slowly through your mind. You pause at every memory that used to sting and notice how the sharp edges have dulled. You sit with the unfinished chapters, the jobs not taken, the years that didn't unfold as planned. And you say, I am still becoming. That's not a denial of effort. That's a devotion to presence. Seneca once said that it doesn't matter how long you live, it matters how well. Maybe now you see what he meant. Because if you're always racing to the next thing, who exactly is living your life while you wait? There's a thought experiment some Stoics liked. Imagine being told you have 1 year to live, not in fear but as a way to recalibrate. What would you stop doing? Who would you stop chasing? What parts of yourself would you bring closer? You don't need to answer tonight. Just let the questions settle like dust on a windowsill. They're not meant to stir you, they're meant to help you see. Because maybe, just maybe, peace isn't about going faster. It's about letting yourself move at the speed of meaning. So if you feel behind, slow down. Not to catch up, but to remember. The version of you that needed to rush was only trying to feel safe. You don't need to hurry to be whole. Let that sink in. You're not late for your life. You're arriving on time for this moment. And that's the only one that ever mattered. It's evening again. Not just in the sky, but inside you. You feel the dimming of urgency. Not because the world has quieted, but because you've started to listen differently. The noise is still there. The traffic of thoughts, the headlines, the old worries waiting like unopened messages in your chest. But tonight something in you steps back. You let the world spin without you. It's not easy. You're used to being in the middle of it all, responding, reacting, checking in, checking out. There's always a screen blinking, a voice calling, a list growing longer. There's always something you should be doing, but now you don't. You sit down, you stay, and you let it all keep moving without your permission. There's a peculiar power in that. You feel it like the first moment you realized you didn't have to pick up every ringing phone. Not every call is your emergency. Not every alert is your job to answer. You are allowed to not participate. Epictetus would have called that freedom by negation. It's not about possessing more, it's about needing less. You loosen your grip on the spinning world and suddenly you're not spinning. You're still. Remember earlier when you resisted the urge to reply, to rush, to prove something. This is the next layer of that same practice. You let go of involvement as identity. You're not the chaos. You're not even the conductor. You're the one watching the train rush past and realizing you don't have to be on it. There's an old Roman metaphor. Imagine life as a chariot race. Everyone is charging forward, whipping their horses, desperate to win. But the wise person, the Stoic, watches from the edge of the arena, not because they're afraid, but because they know that speed without purpose is just noise. Tonight, you take your seat in the stands. You let the others rush. You observe not out of judgment but out of understanding. You see the panic behind the performance. You recognize it because you felt it too. And now you choose something else. You don't post the comment. You don't check the notification. You don't worry what someone thinks of your silence. You let the world spin. Some will say that's selfish. That to withdraw is to abandon responsibility. But is it? Or is it a different kind of service, to model stillness in a time of frenzy? Seneca believed that tranquility wasn't retreat, it was mastery. The person who can stay calm while the fire burns around them is not ignoring the flame. They're just refusing to feed it. Tonight you're learning that. And yet, there's still that whisper inside you. Will I miss out? Will I fall behind? Will people forget me if I step back? You hear it. You acknowledge it, and you don't obey it. Because here's another soft paradox. Sometimes the more you try to stay visible, the more invisible you become. And the more you rest in your truth, the more deeply you're seen, by the only eyes that matter, your own. So breathe. Breathe like nothing needs you for the next few minutes. Because right now, nothing does. You're not holding up the world, you never were, and that's not a failure, that's a relief. You are free to rest, to not know, to sit by the window of your life and simply watch the day fade into its next shape. You don't need to make sense of it yet. You don't need to respond to the spinning. The world will keep turning. Let it. And you'll stay still. It starts small. A text goes unanswered. A plan changes without warning. Someone cuts you off in traffic. The coffee spills, the file doesn't save, your body aches in a way that feels unfair. And just like that, your whole day tilts. But tonight, instead of tumbling into the usual reaction, you pause. You remember a practice so old and so simple that it almost feels too quiet to matter. Ask yourself, is this within my control? The Stoics lived by this question. It was their compass, their filter, their shield. Epictetus, once enslaved, used it to keep his mind free. He would remind himself daily. Some things are up to us, some things are not. You breathe that in now. You ask, is this mine to carry? And in many cases, the answer is no. You couldn't stop the rain, you couldn't make someone kinder. You couldn't control how others interpret your silence. What you could control, what you still can, is how you show up, with steadiness, with self-respect, with a kind of quiet dignity. Think back to a moment that threw you off recently. Something frustrating, maybe even today. What if in that moment, instead of tightening, you had asked, what's within my power here? You might have chosen to let go, or speak gently, or simply walk away without turning it into a story you'd carry all week. But don't turn that thought into regret. This isn't about shame, it's about training. You're not supposed to be perfect. You're supposed to practice. And tonight, this practice continues. It's like tuning a stringed instrument. You don't wait for the music hall to be silent. You learn to adjust your string amid the noise. Here's where the beauty of Stoicism sharpens. It doesn't demand that you suppress your feelings. It asks you to name them, honor them, and choose your response anyway. You feel anger. Good, now look at it. What is it asking for? Is it about fairness or control? You feel sadness. Don't rush to fix it. Let it tell you something about what you value. You feel anxious. That's your imagination sprinting ahead. Remind it that the future is made one breath at a time. Even Marcus Aurelius, emperor of one of the most powerful empires in history, would sit with his journal and remind himself to let go of things beyond his command. He couldn't stop the plagues, or the betrayals, or even his own aging, but he did, decide how he met each moment. And so do you. That email can wait until morning. That misunderstanding doesn't need a perfect explanation. That's silence from someone else. It's not a puzzle you need to solve tonight. You get to return to what's yours, your choices, your breath, your presence. Some philosophers argue that this kind of control, the inner kind, is an illusion. that we're always at the mercy of our biology, our conditioning, our past. But the Stoics would gently disagree. They'd say, yes, you were shaped by many things, but in this moment right now, you can still choose. You can still choose to soften instead of snap, to forgive instead of fester, to stay still instead of spinning. And if you fail, that's fine. You try again tomorrow. The practice continues. Let that thought comfort you. There is no final test, only repetitions. So tonight you ask that question again, is this within my control? And then with a kind of inner bow you return to the only things that ever were, your mind, your actions, your response. The world may still spin tomorrow. The coffee might spill, someone may disappoint you, but you'll be ready. Not because life slowed down, but because you did. You didn't ask for this loss, you didn't expect the change, but here you are, faced with something not going your way. A door closes, a plan dissolves, a version of your life you held tightly just slips from your grasp. And what do? At first maybe you resist, you try to fix it. You argue with reality in the quiet corners of your mind. You imagine how it could have been, how it should have been. You reach for the past like a rope, but eventually you stop pulling. Eventually, something in you exhales and realizes it's gone. And strangely, the silence that follows isn't as hollow as you feared. This is the shape of surrender, not defeat, not resignation, but acceptance with dignity. The Stoics had a word for this, amor fati, the love of fate. Not just enduring what happens, but embracing it. Trusting that, even when life doesn't give you what you wanted, it's still giving you what you need to become who you are. That's not easy. Even Marcus Aurelius wrote about how hard it was to release his expectations. He would remind himself, over and over again, that the universe didn't promise fairness. It only promised cause and effect. He learned to bow, not because he agreed with everything life brought him, but because he refused to be broken by what he couldn't control. Tonight, you're learning that too. There's something you've had to let go of recently. A dream, a person, a version of yourself that felt more certain. You haven't spoken of it much, but you feel its absence like a quiet bruise. It's okay. That ache means you cared. It means you were alive in the story. And now, you're in a new one. You won't always get closure. Sometimes, life doesn't explain itself. And the Stoics would say that's not a flaw. That's how nature works. It unfolds not according to your plan, but according to its own. Still, your mind may try to bargain. If I had just done this differently, if I hadn't trusted, if I'd been faster, smarter, stronger. But pause, look at that voice, and gently tell it, I'm here now. And that's enough. This is the moment you stop resisting the current. You feel it carry you, not away from yourself, but deeper into the part of you that remains calm even as things fall apart. That stillness doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from letting go of the need to have them. There's a fable in Stoic circles. A farmer loses his horse. The villagers say, "What bad luck?" He simply shrugs. Maybe. The next day the horse returns with 2 wild stallions. "Such good luck," they say. Again he replies, "Maybe." His son tries to ride one and breaks his leg. "Terrible luck," again. "Maybe." Then the army comes to conscript young men, but they pass over his son because of the injury. The point? You don't know where this story ends. What you lost might be what made space for what's next. And what feels like a failure might just be a redirection dressed in disappointment. Some philosophers argue that surrender is weakness, that to accept fate is to give up your agency. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. You surrender only what was never yours to begin with. You still act, you still care, you still try. But when the outcome escapes your hands, you bow instead of break. Tonight, something in you softens. You stop gripping what no longer fits. And in the space left behind, something unexpected emerges. A little room to breathe. A little light where the weight used to be. A little voice that says, I can carry on lighter now. Let yourself feel that. Not joy necessarily. Not yet, but relief. Relief that you no longer have to fight what is. You are allowed to want something deeply and still let it go when the time comes. That's not surrender as loss. That's surrender as freedom. It's quiet now. Not just the room around you, but something deeper, something inside. A silence you didn't plan for. It's not the kind of silence that comes when things are peaceful. It's the kind that follows after a decision, after a goodbye, after surrender. And in this silence, something surprising happens. You begin to hear things you couldn't hear before. Your own breath, yes, but also the sound of your thoughts shifting. The way your body settles into stillness like it's remembering something ancient. And most of all, the presence of something true beneath all your noise. Because even silence has weight. It presses softly on your chest, not like panic but like awareness. It invites you not to escape but to stay. The Stoics prized silence, not just the absence of words but the presence of mind. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, taught through quiet walks and fewer words. He believed wisdom was revealed more by restraint than by argument. And maybe you feel that tonight too. That some truths can only be heard when you stop trying to explain them. There's a kind of discomfort in this stillness, though. Your instincts twitch. Your mind scrambles to fill the gap. You think, I should be doing something, but what if you didn't? What if the silence wasn't a void, but a mirror? What if, in this moment, you aren't falling behind or wasting time, but simply returning to the part of you that isn't always performing? You begin to notice things. The way your eyes feel heavy. The way your breath slows without effort. The way your body doesn't need to be convinced to relax, it just needs permission. And in that soft, uncomfortable stillness, a truth lands gently. You don't need to be constantly productive to be worthy. You don't need to perform clarity to have it. You don't need to speak in order to be heard, at least not by yourself. This silence, once scary, becomes a sanctuary. But still, there's a strange paradox here. The quieter it gets, the louder your mind becomes. Old thoughts rise, old patterns, old echoes of conversations that ended long ago but still replay. That's okay. The Stoics knew the mind would wander. That's why they practiced returning. Not once, not twice, but again and again. They understood that discipline wasn't in never drifting, it was in noticing the drift and coming back. So tonight you let your thoughts come. You let them walk through the room without demanding answers from them. You notice the ones that ache, the ones that linger, and you offer them the gift they never expected, silence. No fight, no judgment, just space. That in itself is healing. Some philosophers believe that silence is the language of the soul, that when everything else fades, the roles, the arguments, the ambitions, what remains is the raw, uncluttered self. And that self, it doesn't need fixing, it just needs to be witnessed. By you. Maybe that's why the quiet feels heavy, because it's carrying truth. Truth that your worth is not tied to how fast you think. That your value isn't found in your ability to speak well or act quickly. That sometimes your deepest growth looks like this, lying still, breathing slow, listening to what you've been too busy to hear. So tonight, you let the silence in. Not because you've figured everything out, but because you finally don't need to, not right now. You lie there, eyes closed or barely open. You feel the hum of the fan, the coolness of the air. You let it all be as it is. No fixing, no rushing, no filling the gaps. Even silence has weight. And tonight you're strong enough to hold it. Some nights the stillness feels gentle. Other nights it brushes against something deeper, something darker. Tonight you feel the presence of death, not as a fear but as a quiet visitor. It doesn't knock. It doesn't shout. It just sits in the corner of the room, reminding you that time is always passing and nothing is promised, not even the next breath. And strangely, this doesn't frighten you. It clarifies you. Because when death knocks softly, it isn't asking for your panic. It's asking for your attention. The Stoics thought about death often, not morbidly but as a compass. Memento mori, remember you must die, was not a threat. It was a prompt. A nudge to live fully, without delay, without illusion, and without waiting for some perfect moment. Tonight, you're not running from this truth. You're letting it in. You remember someone you lost recently or long ago. Maybe a friend, a parent, a stranger whose absence still echoes. Or maybe you're facing your own mortality in some quiet, personal way. An illness, a fear, a passing shadow. Let it come. Let the memory sit beside you like an old photograph, not to haunt you, to remind you this moment is real, this breath is a gift, this body, flawed and tender and temporary, is yours right now. Marcus Aurelius wrote often about death, not with despair but with clarity. He called it nature's way of making room, a part of the great unfolding. And he'd remind himself, if something is natural, why fear it? Of course, it's normal to grieve, to wish for more time, to ache over what we love and lose. But the fear of death only steals the life we're still holding. Tonight, you lean into a different approach, not denial, not panic, but presence. You realize everything you love, everything you are, exists in this flickering moment. And that doesn't make life less precious. It makes it more. Suddenly, the small annoyances of the day shrink. The arguments don't matter as much. The pressure to impress fades. What remains are the few things that always mattered: kindness, courage, gratitude, and love. You feel the absurdity of rushing, the futility of perfection, the comedy of trying to control every little thing in a life that is, by nature, unpredictable. And yet, there is comfort here, because you don't need forever to live well. You just need now. Even Seneca, who lost much in his life, wrote that we are not given a short life, but we make it short by wasting it. He believed that the wise person lives with death not behind them but beside them, like a quiet friend whispering, "Make this count." And so you do. You breathe more fully. You think of someone you love and feel the soft ache of knowing they won't always be here. You think of yourself, not as a problem to solve, but as a being passing through this moment like light through a curtain. Maybe this is what it means to hold still when life hurries you, to see the clock and not panic, to feel the limits and not collapse, to accept that time is short, and to be gentle with yourself because of it. Some schools of thought argue that death robs life of meaning, but the Stoics say the opposite. It is the very fact that life ends that gives it shape, texture, depth. You feel that now, not fear, but reverence. So let the night fall as it does. Let death sit nearby not as an enemy but as a teacher. And you stay still. You live this moment not because it's guaranteed, but because it's yours. Your mind is busy tonight. Even as your body slows, even as your breath deepens, it runs loops through conversations, regrets, plans, worries. Thoughts stack on thoughts, a quiet, endless pile of what-ifs and should-haves and what's nexts. It's tempting to follow them all, to chase each one like a thread leading somewhere important. But tonight, you pause. And you remember, you are not the thoughts you chase. That idea seems simple at first. But the more you sit with it, the more radical it becomes. You are not your plans, not your fears, not even your brightest ideas. You are the awareness underneath it all. The Stoics knew this. They spoke often of impressions, those thoughts, feelings, and instincts that rise without warning. Epictetus said, "Not every impression deserves your belief. You can witness them without obeying them, like clouds across a vast sky. Like birds crossing a field of vision. You are the sky, not the weather. Right now, you may notice your thoughts telling you that you're not doing enough, that you need to respond, that you're behind, that you need to solve something before you sleep. But ask yourself, must you? Or are those just reflexes, patterns your mind is used to? Sometimes thinking becomes a form of escape. We convince ourselves that by analyzing, we are controlling. But the truth is, overthinking is often just another way to avoid being. And yet, you can watch it all without judgment. You let the thoughts swirl like wind in a canyon. You hear them, but you don't grab them. You observe them as a philosopher might watch people passing in a marketplace, curious but unmoved. Here's a small practice the Stoics might offer tonight. When a thought arises, instead of saying, "This is true," try saying, "This is a thought." That shift changes everything. "I'll never be happy again" becomes "This is a thought." "I should be further along in life" becomes "This is a thought." "I need to fix this right now" becomes "This is just a thought passing through." And thoughts pass. They always do. Even Marcus Aurelius, emperor and philosopher, reminded himself that most of what we think is unnecessary. He would write, Ask yourself, is this essential? And if it wasn't, he'd let it go. You can do the same. Right now there is no emergency, no test, no one watching but you. You don't need to perform for your thoughts. You don't need to win them over. Let them wander. Let them loop. Let them soften. Some modern thinkers suggest that detaching from thoughts is dangerous, that it leads to disconnection. But the Stoics would argue, it's not detachment from life, but from illusion. You're not avoiding reality. You're meeting it more clearly, without being swept away by every passing wave of mental noise. You are not the one who panics. You are the one who notices the panic and stays rooted, like a rock in a rushing river, like a lighthouse in a storm. That image may comfort you tonight. The thoughts will keep moving, but they don't define you. They don't own you. You don't need to push them away. You just don't have to follow them either. Let your mind whisper if it must, but stay anchored in your breath. You are not your thinking. You are the stillness behind it. Somewhere deep in your chest, there's a pressure you don't always name. It doesn't scream, it leans. Gently, constantly. Like a hand on your back urging you forward. Be more, do more, prove something, anything, just don't stop. This pressure has followed you for years, hasn't it? It wears many masks: ambition, responsibility, self-improvement. Sometimes it even sounds noble: make something of yourself, don't waste your potential. And maybe parts of it have helped you grow. But tonight you feel something else, the weight of it, the endless chase, the subtle shame of never quite arriving, the way every victory is quickly replaced by a new benchmark, a new thing to fix, achieve, or earn. And so tonight you rest from all that. You take off the armor of constant progress, just for a while. You whisper to yourself softly, honestly, I am enough even here. That's not complacency. That's not quitting. That's simply returning to your original self before the pressure, before the performance, before the belief that your worth needed to be earned. The Stoics didn't chase glory the way many do today. Even Marcus Aurelius, emperor of the Roman Empire, reminded himself often that applause was fleeting, that the opinions of others would fade, that even great names would be forgotten. He asked himself, what is praise but a passing noise? And then he'd return to the only question that mattered. Am I doing what's right? Tonight that question turns inward. Can you be still in yourself without needing to be seen? It's a humbling thing to recognize how much of your striving is tied to being witnessed. You want to be known, understood, validated. That's human. But the Stoics offer a quiet rebellion. Live well even if no one is watching. Do the right thing even when there's no applause. Sit in your own presence even when there's no mirror. It's a hard thing to do, especially in a world obsessed with being seen. But you can feel it, can't you? The peace that comes when you stop performing, even just for a moment. It's like stepping out of costume. It's like remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. Maybe you've felt it before in those rare moments when time slowed down. A walk at dusk, a quiet meal, an honest laugh with someone who really sees you. In those moments you weren't chasing. You were simply there. And tonight you return to that presence. You're not building anything right now. You're not measuring your growth. You're not fixing your flaws. You're simply breathing, being, resting. Some philosophers argue that human progress depends on pressure, that without ambition we would stagnate. But the Stoics would offer a nuance. Pressure without peace is poison. Ambition, when untethered from virtue, becomes a treadmill with no end. Stillness doesn't stop your evolution. It makes it real. Because when you're not acting for applause, you finally have space to ask, what matters to me? Not to your boss, not to your parents, not to the algorithm, but to you. And when you ask that from stillness, the answers are quieter than you expected. A little more kindness, a little more presence, a little less pretending. So tonight you take one more breath. You let the pressure melt, not forever, but long enough to remember you are not a project. You are a person. Not a brand, not a checklist, not a slogan. A person sitting here breathing quietly in the dark. And that is enough. There's a feeling you know well, though you rarely admit it out loud. You crave control. Not over everything, just the things that matter most. You want to know how it'll turn out, if they'll stay, if the risk will be worth it, if your plans will work, if your heart will heal, if you'll be okay. And so you try, you plan, you fix, you anticipate, you rehearse conversations that haven't happened and imagine futures that may never come. You try to steer a ship through storms you haven't even seen yet. But tonight, you let your hands fall from the wheel. You realize that the chase for control is exhausting you more than the unknown itself. This is a different kind of stillness, not the stillness of silence or of rest, but of surrendering your grip on the illusion of certainty. Because that's all it ever was, an illusion. The Stoics understood this. They called it the dichotomy of control. Some things are up to us and some things are not. It's one of the simplest and hardest truths they taught. It doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you give up. It means you act without attachment to outcome. You sow the seed, but you don't scream at the sky for rain. You say what needs to be said, but you don't chase someone's approval through the night. You prepare as best you can, but you don't build your identity out of things that can crumble. Tonight, think of one thing you've been trying to control lately. Maybe it's someone's opinion of you. Maybe it's a result you desperately wanted to go your way. Maybe it's the pace of your healing. And now, unclench. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you're ready to stop clinging. You realize that letting go doesn't mean losing. It means trusting. Trusting that you can meet whatever comes with calm, with dignity, with wisdom. Even Marcus Aurelius, for all his power, knew the limits of control. He couldn't control the weather, the politics of the Senate, or even the health of his children. But he could control how he responded, with clarity, with perspective, with grace. You can too. It starts with one breath, then another. And then the quiet reminder, I will show up, but I will not grasp. You are not a god. You're not supposed to steer the stars. You are human. You do what you can, and you let the rest be. That sounds simple, but it's one of the most radical acts in a world obsessed with outcomes. It's not passive, it's powerful. It means you trust your effort more than you fear the result. Some thinkers argue that giving up control is weakness, but the Stoics knew it's the only way to access true strength. Because real strength doesn't come from getting your way. It comes from knowing you'll be okay either way. So tonight, as you lie still, repeat this softly in your mind. I did what I could. I am doing what I can. And I release what I cannot. Let that be enough. Let that quiet you. Let the thoughts that beg you to interfere fall away like dry leaves. You don't have to micromanage your life into meaning. You are not a puppeteer. You are a presence. A steady, soft force that moves with care, not control. You are the rock that holds through the flood, not because it blocks the water, but because it lets it pass. So let it pass. Let the need to fix pass. Let the need to predict pass. Let the night come and go, and meet it with the courage of someone who knows. Whatever happens next, I'll be here ready, still. You wake sometimes with a weight you can't explain. Not a memory, not a dream. Just a heaviness in the chest, like the air is thicker, like you're already behind before the day begins. And in those moments, it's easy to forget what matters. It's easy to confuse tiredness with failure, or quiet with absence, or stillness with stagnation. But tonight you return to a quieter truth. You're allowed to be where you are. No rush, no deadline, no need to have figured it all out by now. Because progress doesn't always look like motion. Sometimes it looks like staying, like standing your ground when everything inside wants to run, like feeling the ache of not knowing and choosing not to panic. Stillness doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means what's happening is happening within. The Stoics often wrote about inner architecture. They believed each person is a kind of city, one they're constantly building through their actions, choices, and beliefs. Every time you respond with grace instead of anger, you strengthen the foundation. Every time you choose patience, another wall stands firm. Every time you return to your breath, your streets become more peaceful. And like any city, there are days of noise and repair. But even on those days, the structure holds. Tonight, you remind yourself you are still being built, and not just through your successes, but through your restraint, through your returns, through every moment you choose not to collapse into chaos, Think of the days you held it together, barely, and didn't get any credit. The conversations you chose not to escalate. The fears you carried quietly so others could rest. Those weren't small. They were your philosophy lived. Even Marcus Aurelius knew that most of your strength will go unseen by the world. He said, "The fruit of this life is good character and acts for the common good." Not noise, not glory, just quiet integrity. You live that already more than you realize. But still, the voice of doubt creeps in. The one that says you're too slow, too unsure, too late. You hear it, don't you? That voice is not your truth. It's your conditioning. You've lived in a world that confuses urgency with importance, visibility with value. But tonight, you remember, the seed does not rush. The moon does not explain itself. The tree grows in silence, unseen beneath the soil, and so do you. Some thinkers argue that we only grow through struggle. That discomfort is the engine of change. The Stoics agreed, but they added something essential. Struggle must be chosen with wisdom, not inherited from chaos. You don't need to suffer everything. You don't need to say yes to every challenge. You're allowed to ask, is this mine to bear? And if the answer is no, you are allowed to set it down. You don't owe the world your exhaustion. You owe it your presence. So tonight you reclaim your right to move slowly, to grow gently, to build inwardly. You breathe again, slower now. You let your shoulders drop. You stop performing strength and start resting in it. Let this be the new rhythm. Effort without self-abandonment. Ambition without self-punishment. Stillness not as avoidance but as truth. The work you're doing inside yourself matters, even if no one sees, even if it's quiet, even if it's slow. Because what you're building is you. You've been told to stay strong. Since you were young, in subtle and loud ways, the world has nudged you toward hardness, toward bracing, preparing, achieving, proving. Don't cry, don't falter. Don't let them see the cracks. But what if that's not strength? What if true strength is something softer, something like openness, something like gentleness, something like stillness, not as inaction but as presence without force? The Stoics wrote often about strength, but not the kind measured by resistance or volume. Their strength lived in clarity, in restraint, in the ability to choose your response, not be enslaved by your reaction. Seneca said, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." And tonight, you feel that, how just breathing through the unknown is its own kind of bravery. You don't need to fix anything right now. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone, not even to yourself. Instead, you allow this moment to soften you. Think about the last time you were hurt, not a sharp wound, but a quiet disappointment, a misunderstanding, a dream that slipped away without explanation. You remember how quickly your body tightened, how your thoughts scrambled to armor up, to make sense of it, to shield against the sting. But tonight, you let the armor rest. You don't need to defend against life. You're allowed to feel it. There's a misconception that Stoicism means indifference, but that's a distortion. The Stoics weren't stone. They felt deeply, they just didn't let feelings steer the ship. They believed in guiding emotions, not suppressing them. Marcus Aurelius felt grief. Epictetus endured loss, but they met those waves with steadiness, with a kind of courage that whispered, "This too is part of living. Let it be part of me." Tonight you practice that. You feel what you feel and you stay. You don't chase a distraction. You don't turn the feeling into a story. You simply breathe through it. Like someone watching the tide rise and fall, knowing it won't last forever. That's strength. And here's a gentle paradox. The more you allow yourself to be soft, the less likely you are to shatter. You bend, you sway, you stay whole. In Japan, there's an art called kintsugi, the practice of repairing broken pottery with gold, making the cracks part of the design, not something to be hidden. The object becomes more beautiful for having been broken. The Stoics would have nodded at this, because their philosophy isn't about being untouched by life. It's about being shaped by it in a way that makes you truer, not harder. So tonight, you ask yourself, where have I mistaken hardness for strength? Is it in the way you hold back tears? In the way you push through without asking for help? In the way you speak to yourself when you fall short? And more importantly, What would softened strength look like? It might sound like, I'm still proud of myself even if I didn't finish everything. I'm allowed to rest before I'm exhausted. I don't need to carry every burden just to prove I can. Some schools of thought treat softness as weakness, but the Stoics teach that strength without wisdom is violence, and wisdom without compassion is empty. The world doesn't need more armored people, it needs more whole ones. And tonight you become just a little more whole, not by adding anything but by releasing what no longer fits. Let the breath deepen. Let the jaw unclench. Let the shoulders loosen. You are not losing strength. You are remembering what it really is. The world moves fast. Even as you lie here still and silent, somewhere emails are being sent, deadlines are ticking, engines are revving, lights are blinking. There's a pulse to the modern world that never seems to sleep. And yet, you do. Or at least, you try to. It can be hard to fall asleep in a world that values speed over stillness, noise over depth, attention over presence. It tells you to keep up, stay ahead, be more. But tonight, you step off that track. You let yourself fall behind. You let yourself rest. Not just physically, but philosophically. Because what if this rest isn't a pause from life, but part of life? The Stoics would agree. They believed in effort, yes, but not frantic striving. They prized orderly action, movement that came from reason, not reaction. And they believed that rest was not a luxury, but a practice of self-stewardship. Even Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you don't have to turn this into something more than it is. Sometimes, enough is enough. Tonight, let those words cradle you. You don't need to optimize this moment. You don't need to mine it for lessons. You don't even need to think clearly. You only need to be. Think of a river. On the surface, there may be turbulence. But underneath, there is always a current, deep, calm, enduring. That's your inner self. The noise above may rise and fall. But down here, in the part of you not moved by urgency, you are steady. You are timeless. Some nights even the idea of rest can feel unreachable, like a goal, like another thing to achieve. But sleep isn't earned. It's returned to, like a home, like an old friend. And you are allowed to return there now. Think of a moment, any moment, where you felt no pressure to be anything. Maybe as a child lying in grass, or a late-night drive watching streetlights blur past, or even now in this stillness. Hold that moment like a stone in your palm. Let it ground you. Let it remind you, you don't have to keep up with the world to be part of it. In fact, by slowing down, you often see more clearly. Some philosophies claim that productivity is the highest good. That motion equals meaning. But the Stoics saw meaning in alignment with nature, with virtue, with what is. And nature sleeps. It pauses. It moves in seasons, not schedules. You are not behind. You are in season. So tonight you honor this season. You let go of the invisible scoreboard. You stop trying to be impressive. You remember that you are allowed to do nothing. Not just occasionally, but whenever your soul asks for it. Stillness is not the enemy of progress. It's the soil that growth rises from. You don't need to defend this rest. You don't need to justify it. You just need to surrender to it. So now, as the room grows quieter, you give yourself that permission to be a little slower, a little softer, a little more human. You return to the rhythm that has always been beneath the rush. One breath, then another. Nothing forced, nothing wasted. You've made it here without rushing. One breath at a time, one quiet truth after another, you've walked this path not to reach an answer, but to remember something you've always known. You are not at war with life. You are in it. And even when it spins, even when it aches, even when it hurries you, you can stay still. Not frozen, not passive, but rooted, awake, willing to stand inside the moment as it is. That's what you've practiced here. Each night, each breath, each letting go was not an escape from life, but a rehearsal for how to meet it with grace. And now, as you near the end of this journey, you feel the shift. Not a grand transformation, not fireworks, just quiet knowing. You remember what the Stoics always pointed toward, that freedom is not found in perfect circumstances. It's found in perfect response. And perfect doesn't mean flawless, it means aligned. With nature, with truth, with virtue. So you rest in that tonight. You rest in the stillness you've been cultivating, not as a trick but as a way of being. There's one more truth before you sleep. One more lesson that holds all the others. You are already enough. Not because you've finished the to-do list. Not because you've achieved inner peace. But because you are here and aware and trying to live gently in a world that moves fast. The Stoics never promised comfort. They promised clarity. And clarity doesn't always feel good, it feels real. And what's real right now? Your breath, your body, the weight of your presence in this moment. So here's the final paradox. You don't need to move to get anywhere. You don't need to change to become anyone. You are not falling behind. You are simply returning, again and again, to the quiet place where nothing has to be earned, where you are not your past, not your plans, not your worries, just this. Just here, just you. And now we begin to wind down. Let the images fade. Let the thoughts drift like snow. Let the body feel heavier in the bed as if the earth is cradling you, not pulling you down but holding you. The journey was long, not in miles but in meaning. You've walked through grief, through stillness, through surrender, through memory. And now you arrive at a place with no name, a clearing, a hush, a soft, slow breath beneath the stars. There is nothing to do now, no more parts to play, no more thoughts to untangle, no more truths to chase. You are allowed to be here exactly as you are. The world will still spin, the clock will still tick, the sun will rise again tomorrow. But for now, you don't have to keep up, you only have to rest, you only have to soften. Let the darkness be kind, let the silence be deep. Let sleep take you not as a thief but as a friend.